is very informal, so please do feel free to keep your cameras on throughout if you feel comfortable doing so. If you can pop your organisation name either on your screen name or feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know who's joining us today, what organisations you're joining us from. And if you have any access requirements that you haven't already told us about, please do feel free to drop me a message in the chat and we'll do our best to accommodate those during the session. But again, you're very welcome, and we're really looking forward to an action-packed session. So I will, without further ado, I will pass over to Ashita to get started with an introduction to social investment.
Thanks, everyone. It's really, really lovely to be here. I am Ishita, and behind me is Rufus. He will also be joining us for this morning's session. I am the project director of Good Finance. I've been at Good Finance for coming up to 5 years now. And alongside working at Good Finance, I also run a social enterprise. So I like to think that when we're talking about all things finance, have some kind of idea of what charities and social enterprises are navigating out there. But my job really involves just looking after Good Finance and our day-to-day kind of operations and activities, and really looking forward to talking all things social investment with everyone here this morning. So I've been at Good Finance for about 5 years now, and I will say that I'm still very much learning about the world of social investment as well, and it's a world that is full of financial terms and buzzwords and jargon, and we will try and clear some of that up for everyone today. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone out there that knows it already. So we will start with an introduction to social investment this morning. And I will say that I'm probably the least interesting part of the agenda, but I will try and make it as interesting as possible. But we've got some great peer speakers that are joining us today who will tell you their stories of what it was like navigating this stuff. But before we dive in today, something that we would really love to do is get an understanding of how you'd currently rate your kind of current knowledge and understanding of social investment. So if you hop on over to menti.com, Olivia's just posted the link in the chat. You should see a question comes up that asks you to rate your knowledge of social investment from 1 to 10. So we will just take a minute here and let everybody get on and rate their knowledge of social investment. And what Olivia will do in a second as well is that she'll share the results that are coming through so you can kind of see. So if you click the link that Olivia sent, or if you go to menti.com and enter that code, you should be able to see it. So we've got about 7 responses at the moment, I think, and we're coming in at about 4.6, which is great. I'll just pause for a minute whilst we get some more answers. Please do pop a note in the chat if you're having any tech issues getting onto the Menti. Okay, so we've got a few more responses coming in and we're getting into about 5 at the moment. Hold for another 10 seconds and see if that changes at all. So our goal today is to help you improve that knowledge and understanding wherever you are. You'll see that that kind of line, that sort of humps, kind of show the distribution of responses. So what's interesting is that we've got quite a few people that have scored themselves at, by the looks of it, between sort of 1 and 3, and then a few that have scored themselves at 5, which is sort of bringing that average up. But yeah, the goal today is very much to help you on that journey. So what is social investment, and what do we mean when we're talking about social investment? So social investment is the use of repayable finance to help an organization achieve its social purpose. And that's probably one of the most important things to keep in mind about it, is that in some way, shape or form, it is repayable finance. Social investment very much sits alongside grants, donations, and other income streams that you have. And it's most applicable to charities and social enterprises who are generating a profit or a surplus in some way, and because that profit and surplus is then used to repay social investors for that investment. So we'll have a very short video that kind of explains how social investment works, which I think Olivia has got all queued up for us.
Across the UK, charities and social enterprises like yours are tackling some of society's biggest problems. Maybe you've set up a coffee business to give people the skills to get back into work, or are running a nursery and using the profits to support local parents. Whatever your mission, you'll need money to help with cash flow, to grow your organisation, or to buy an asset like a new building. You might even need finance to kickstart your new venture, and that money could come from traditional grants or donations, or as a loan from your local bank. One option is to get that money from a social investor. That social investor could be an organisation or an individual, and you can borrow their money or offer them shares in your organisation. But what makes a social investor different? Well, they don't just want to see a return on their investment. They want to see their money being used for good, helping you to keep delivering your social mission. Sound good? To see if it's right for you, check out goodfinance.org.uk.
Awesome, thanks, Olivia. So the important things to know about social investment really is that it is just one tool in your financial toolkit. It may not always be the right tool for the job, and there are specific circumstances under which it works better. So if you think of your financial toolkit as an organization, of including various sources like trading, donations and fundraising, contracts or payment by results, grants, and banks, social investment is one of the tools that sits alongside that. And where we see it working really well is when organizations have the kind of clarity of purpose of why they're using it. So that can be to help buy an asset, to help you deliver a contract, to kickstart part of your organization, to grow your work, or to develop new innovations. But where it tends to work really well is when you've got some kind of clarity of purpose of why you're using it. And the important thing to know is that it's not kind of like a binary or a linear thing. Over the course of your organization's kind of history, you may use a combination of these tools depending on your circumstances at any one given time. And what we do quite often see as well is organizations that are using multiple tools at the same time. And so our goal really is to help you understand social investment as a tool and when it is and isn't the right tool for the job. So there's a couple of key things that you need to keep in mind when you are considering social investment. The first one is the purpose. So what do you need that investment for? Is it to buy an asset, to kickstart a new venture, to grow and to innovate, or simply to maintain your cash flow for existing activities? The second thing to consider is repayment. So social investment, unlike grant, is something that you have to repay. So a key question is, do you have a profitable income stream? Is that through contract, rental income, membership fees, or donations and trading? But actually that repayment element and how you're going to pay it back is as important a consideration as anything else. And then finally, what impact will you create? And this is really important because social investors will want to understand your social impact as well as the potential financial returns. So that means looking at your activities and your outcomes. Do you have a really clear sense of who's benefiting from them, how they benefit for it? How do you measure and report against your impact goals? And how is your impact and outcome sustainable? And one of the key reasons why that's really important to be able to communicate is because actually a lot of social investors themselves are charities and social enterprises. So on the Good Finance Investor Directory, kind of listed probably upwards of 100 investors. And when we did our sort of little due diligence on them, looking at the legal structures of those investors, actually what we found that was that in the UK of the investors that we have listed on the directory, over 85% of those social investors are themselves charities and social enterprises. So it's really important for them to be investing in line with their impact goals and their kind of social mission, which is why it's really important that you're also able to communicate that social impact element. So when you get down to the details of it, there are dozens and dozens of different types and forms of social investment. You may have had lots of different terms over the years, from, I don't know, unsecured loans to community shares, there are so many different types of social investment, but what's really helpful to keep in mind is that they inherently fall into two types. One is debt, the other is equity. So debt is when an organization borrows the money and pays it back, usually with interest over a period of time, not dissimilar to a mortgage or a car loan, etc. It's just, you know, that basic principle of debt: you borrow the money, pay it back with interest. Equity, on the other hand, is when an organization sells shares to an investor. So that investor then owns a percentage of the organization. And then in terms of where you can actually get social investment from, I will absolutely say if you're actively considering it at the moment, then definitely check out the Good Finance website and the investor directory. But again, there are so many different sources of where you can get social investment from. And the key thing to keep in mind is that there are sort of two main providers. So one provider is organizations, other organizations. So this can be specialist social investment firms, it can be social banks, it can be trusts and foundations, you know, organizations that do typically grant giving, but also do a part of social investment. Or it can be individuals. So it could be through things like crowdfunding, community shares, angel investors. It can also come through individuals. But those are basically the two main sources of investment. So what's really helpful to keep in mind when you're navigating this world, because there's so many different terms, is that actually there are two main types: that's debt or equity, and there are two main sources, which is organizations or individuals. And so in terms of like understanding what's motivating different investors, social investors inherently want to see an impact that their money is making, not just a financial return. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not considering financial return. They absolutely are. But on that kind of scale of different sort of organizations that are providing social investment, they all have different sources of capital and they all have different sort of underlying motivations. So what you might find is some organizations are more philanthropic, perhaps trusts and foundations, and the kind of source of their capital is philanthropic, and what they're trying to do with their capital is mainly create social return. And on the other end, you may have sort of more traditional investment organizations that are interested in financial return, but they also want to do social good, but the source of their capital may be more interested in financial return. And it's really helpful to kind of keep those kind of two elements in mind, that social return versus financial return, because they will influence things like the level of risk an investor is able to take, what an investor's kind of portfolio looks like, and how an investor is able to set the cost of capital or the interest rate on the repayment. But inherently, social investment is sort of in that kind of middle bit where most investors are looking at both social and financial return, but how much they're considering each will kind of be influenced by the source of their capital. So we have a couple of case studies, which we won't share this morning, but we will send these slides around so that you can read some of those case studies for yourself. But what we have this morning, which is so much better than case studies, is some real life peer stories. So I will hand back over to Olivia to introduce our peer speakers in a second, but we've got Andrew, Carolyn and Paul joining us this morning to share their social investment stories, and I really encourage you to just use that space and time with them to ask all of your questions. But yeah, that was a quick whiz through an introduction to social investment, and Olivia, will hand back over to you now.
Thanks so much, Ishita. And yeah, again, thank you very much for our speakers for joining this morning. Just to say as well, if you do have any questions throughout the session, please do feel free to drop them in the chat, or we can come to them obviously after we've heard from the peer speakers. So without further ado, I will pass across first of all to Andrew from Energy Training Academy, who will be talking a little bit about the social investment that they received.
Hi there, thanks Olivia. Yes, my name is Andrew Lamond. I'm from Energy Training Academy through in Dalkeith. I'm one of the founders and directors here. We started this off opened last February, but it started probably August the year before. A lot of work involved just to get it to the point where we're open. A big part of that was Firstport and Daisy from Firstport. Without the funding that we received from them, we wouldn't be open today. It was hugely important. Just like any new startup business, those first few months while you're trying to build up revenue is always challenging. We are in a point now where we're doing okay, but like I said, that the first port funding was critical for us, along with some other support from Midlothian Council and some other local authorities. But certainly, first port was the biggest part of that. What we do here is we train up existing tradespeople, but also aspiring tradespeople, mainly around gas, renewables. So we do solar, heat pumps, EV chargers, battery storage as well, but also gas, as I mentioned. There's still 22 million gas appliances in the UK. They still need maintained, but what we see that as an opportunity to upskill these individuals into renewable technologies. So when we bring them in, every gas engineer has to retrain every 5 years. So we bring them in. While they're in, we speak a lot about renewable technologies. You might see some of the stuff around me. Here we've got gas boilers, but behind me we've got a heat pump. So the idea is when they're coming in to train on this, we're also teaching them about the heat pumps. And that's one of the ways we see that we're going to help get to the net zero targets. The other thing is actually training up new engineers from scratch. And this is like one of the social things that we do, but we're trying to take people that have, for whatever reason, been out of employment or on low income, and we give them an opportunity to retrain at any age, over 18. There's no limit, but we take them in and through 27 weeks. We give them intensive training, initially on the gas, because we need that as a prerequisite to go into the heat pump course. But by the end of that program, they will be qualified gas engineers and also qualified heat pump installers. And as you know, with the targets that we hear regularly, like in Scotland last year, the target for heat pumps was 100,000 units to get installed, and we actually only did 6,000. So we're miles away from where we need to be, and what we need is skilled people coming through. And we think anyway that relying purely on colleges and apprenticeships to get people through, we're not going to get there. So our model is giving other people, adults mainly, opportunities to contribute and learn these new skills. So far we have completed, we've completed 2 of these programs, these cohorts. We've had 4 in total, and we've got a 5th one starting in July. The first 2 cohorts have all gone into full-time employment, which is great to see. The 3rd and 4th cohorts, they're all in placements. 2 of the students have been offered full-time employment during their course. They've not even finished it yet, and they've already been offered jobs, which is brilliant. And the 5th one in July is looking to be fully booked. We don't put any more than 8 people on these classes just to make sure we maintain that level of quality with the trainer to the trainees. We could probably do more than that, but we don't want to lose that quality. We run 2. The plan is to run a cohort every 2 months, so 6 classes a year. However, this year it's been a bit of a challenge because we picked up a large contract with Octopus Energy back in March. That started, so they wanted us to train 300 of their engineers from England to become heat pump installers. And having 300 engineers through here has taken up a lot of the space. It's great for the business, for the social enterprise, because it keeps us going. But it does mean we have to push back some of these managed learning program courses. But that does mean we'll have a fully booked course in July, and in September is going that way as well. So it's looking good. But from that point, we've already been asked by Highlands and Islands Enterprise, South of Scotland Enterprise, how we can expand and replicate this model elsewhere, which is obviously very encouraging for us. You're going into this at the start thinking, will it work? Is there demand for this? And it's good to see that other regions throughout Scotland are looking to get involved and looking to bring us out to their area. Our model is slightly different from other training providers because, except from being a social enterprise, we work with the manufacturers quite closely. So this room I'm sitting in just now is a Worcester Bosch room. We have other ones. We have Ideal, we have Samsung, we have Daikin, a few well-known companies within the heating industry. What that allows us to do is reduce cost, because this room was just a shell, and then they come along with all their branding and their kit, and it makes it look nice. Great place for the students to train, to get hands-on experience with some of the kit. But for us, the main thing is that it reduces costs, which is hugely important being a startup social enterprise. As we grow, we're hoping to keep pushing on and hopefully attract some more support and funding, because without that, we won't get all the people through the door that we need. Just now, I think we have applications into Mid Lothian and East Lothian Council for No One Left Behind funding. And that is, again, just to offer, well, it's two sides actually. We try to offer people on low incomes or unemployed this kind of fully funded course to do the gas and heat pump training. The other side is to take groups of 12 from local schools. I think it's 24 from East Lothian and 24 from Mid Lothian, Mid and East. And it's young people at school from 4th year onwards. We want to bring them in, and it's kind of skills for basic trades. So it's maybe a bit of plumbing, a bit of gas, a bit of electrical work, hopefully a bit of renewables as well. And these are students that have already made it clear to the school that they want to drop out of the academic system. We want to bring them in, give them a bit of a taster, let them see what it's all about. They might decide exactly what trade they want to go in, or they might do a full U-turn and say, no, I don't want to get into trade, I'll go back to school. So we're hoping to get positive results either way, but hoping that'll start in August. So a lot will depend on the results from the funding. And that's the kind of stuff we're really hoping to push on. We're looking to build an e-learning suite just now as well that we can push out to the schools rather than having them all coming in here. Because I know, like my daughter's school nearby, they've got 1,500 students. To try and bring 1,500 students in here alongside all the other training going on, it's not going to work. Whereas we have this e-learning package that we're working on, we can send it out to the schools, we can teach them about renewable technologies, we can try and get them inspired, engage them with what we're doing, and maybe we'll see them coming back in here at some point to learn a trade, or maybe they'll go away and become educators themselves and teach their families, their parents, a wee bit about energy efficiency, green skills, and that's the kind of thing we're hoping to build. But we're into our second year now, and it is going well. We're getting busier all the time. And as I said, we are looking to expand into other areas. But none of it would have been possible without the support from First Port. And yeah, that's kind of where we are now. And we're just hoping to keep going. And we'll see what happens later this year and going into next year. If there's any questions there.
Yeah, Andrew, really exciting to hear about your organisation, but it'd be great to hear a little bit around how did you go about, I guess, building that relationship with First Port? What did that experience of social investment look like?
Yeah, so it was a long process, but obviously very worthwhile. But it started off with a conversation. Excuse me. I actually went for the wrong fund to start with. I think it was called Start It, which was like a £5,000 grant from First Port. And I applied for that, and I put in the information, and quite quickly I had a phone call back from Annie Tunnicliffe at First Port, and she saw the project and she understood it and said £5,000 sounds like it's not going to do anything at all for your ambition. So then I was put on to the Boost It, I think it was called, award. Boost It was, Daisy will maybe tell if I'm wrong, but I think £25,000 or up to £50,000, one of the two. But again, as we progressed through the chat, it was, no, we need to look at the Catalyst the Catalyst Fund, which goes up to, we got awarded £300,000 in the end. It took over a year, I'd say, from start to finish, just getting all the applications, written up and going through a few calls and meetings, but it was all supported by First Port, the whole team there. They're extremely supportive. They kind of held our hand at every stage all the way through. So the First Port were fantastic with us, and it was the best inquiry we did. Even though if it was for the wrong one, it was still, we got there in the end. We got to the right one.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. It'd be great as well when we get to the Q&A to talk a little bit around kind of how that return looks like. Because I know with the Catalyst Fund, it's a revenue participation model. See, there's a question there. So maybe if we just talk quickly about that, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. The question is, can you outline how First Port makes a return on this social investment?
So we do have, our forecast, our financial forecast was strong. So once we are up at capacity, there should be significant profit or surplus revenue coming through. And that, I suppose, when First Port will make the return, it is built in. It's 2 years, and only when we make profit do we make repayments. And there is interest on those repayments. It's not huge. It's structured in a way that supports us and allows us to kind of grow. We're not weighed down by huge interest rates or anything like that. And the crucial thing is we make repayments when we make profit. So month on month here, it can fluctuate, more so just now. But once we get more established and we have these big contracts like Octopus Energy coming along and giving us regular work, you're hoping that the profit will follow and First Port will get all their money back with a slight bit of interest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew. And definitely looking forward to coming with some more questions at the end of the session. But thank you very much for sharing. Bear with me just 1 minute and I'm just going to pop the spotlight on Karen. Okay, over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you very much for inviting me to contribute today. I'm Carolyn Powell. I'm the Joint General Manager of Huntley Development Trust. Just a little bit of background here. Huntley Development Trust was established in 2009. It's a registered Scottish charity and a company limited by guarantee. We're governed by a voluntary board of directors. We have 8 of them at the moment. We operate currently with no overdraft facilities, purely through an income source. And our turnover is in the region of £300,000 to £400,000 a year, which I'll explain. Our mission is to create opportunities for the local district, so that's the town of Huntley, and the district of a specific postcode, which is AB54. Very early on, when the trust was formed, it very wisely recognised that it needed its own core income, and that this would be vital to cover the cost of running the organisation, but also to leverage in funding by providing its own match funding. So between about 2011 to 13, the trust set about purchasing and purchased finally in 2013 63 acres of farmland with a dilapidated farmhouse on it, and immediately developed the plans for the site, including erecting our own wind turbine. Now there are, as you know, rarely one turbine on its own, and there are a few others in which, because they sit on our land, we have small interest. So what HDT did at that point was form a subsidiary company called Greenmires Renewable Energy, and the sole mission of that subsidiary is to manage the turbine, the income and the payments, which are then made to the main trust, HDT, through quarterly payments. It varies, obviously, depending on how well the wind blows. So we're always happy when it. So from 2013, the turbine went up and the trust worked on a whole variety of projects, including creating path networks, refurbishing the farmhouse at Greenmires. That's created an eco-bothy, and we're developing adventure tourism on that site. A sustainable travel hub where we have a fleet of 21 e-bikes and 2 electric cars. And in the town centre, this became a priority in 2018 to 19 when I joined the organisation. There was the creation of a town strategy which saw a focus on helping to develop and improve the town centre, which had declined like many others. And this is where we began large capital projects. We purchased, over a very short period, 3 buildings. The first one was a closed bank, and we refurbished it and subsequently let it to a community bookshop, which is run by volunteers, and that's helped create footfall in the town. Another one is now the base for the Huntley Travel Hub, which covers the e-bikes, the cars, and the community minibus. And the third one, which is the biggie, which is called Number 30, is very large building, which was a former department store over 3 levels. It's duly listed. And the purpose of this building was to refurbish it to provide mixed use facility. So cafe, cinema, event space, training and skills centre, retail and co-working. And this is all over 1,300 square metres of duly listed historic building in a conservation area. The cost of this project is bottoming out at 3.6 million. This is when we needed the help, as you can imagine. Now that project is due to open in a couple of months' time, but during the process of managing the contractors, the spend, obviously the funding was relatively straightforward. We got the funding, it was sitting in the bank, and we were able to pay the contractors when they submitted their invoice for the month's work. However, even though we're a charity and we do get our VAT returned, some of these invoices were carrying £60,000 to £70,000 a month for VAT. Now, if that had been a situation where we'd had to cover that, it would have severely impacted our normal ability to function. And for all organisations like us, the two big challenges are always cash flow and revenue. And I think that's true of most organisations like us, combined with tight funding deadlines, administration on funding. So the situation with number 30 and the VAT was how to manage over £700,000 worth of that over the course of the construction period, which at that point was estimated to be about between 2.5 and 3 years. We went to our own bank and they referred us to Social and Community Capital, where we met Tracy and the team, absolutely extraordinary. And what they did for us was they provided a VAT bridging loan, and that enabled us to draw down the exact amount to cover the VAT on those invoices, just for the days that we needed it. And that was returned when the VAT was returned to us by HMRC. Now, interestingly, the interest is calculated on a daily basis. So we could easily see with figures that were provided to us exactly what that was costing us. And if we paid it back the next day instead of one day, we knew exactly how much extra it was going to cost. Social and Community Capital are a charity themselves and a subsidiary of the bank. The most important thing about them is that they understand the needs of third sector organisations and charities, because we're not the same as commercial organisations. Our needs are different. We need a level of understanding and flexibility in arrangements for finance that don't necessarily apply to commercial organisations. It's quite interesting that the third sector and charities are really not fully understood by many of them, not all, but many of the mainstream banking sectors. And it's extraordinary sometimes to consider that they see us as more of a risk sometimes, and yet evidentially that's not the case. But it does present real big hurdles and challenges for us to complete missions that are actually to the benefit of communities, but at the same time ensure that our own operations can run smoothly. And we need flexibility, we need understanding, and certainly with this particular Social and Community Capital bridging loan, that's what we achieved. They not only understood what we wanted, but they understood that things change and things can happen during that time. And sometimes it did for us over that period, because where we were expecting one particular size of an invoice, sometimes it wasn't that, sometimes it was different. So it was constantly changing, but the communications were amazing and almost instantaneous. I think Tracy has to get the record for answering emails in the fastest possible time. But it was a personal relationship, and I think because we deal with people all the time, and in sometimes sometimes difficult circumstances, because we're working closely with communities and trying to deliver quite hard to deliver things. That personal relationship is incredibly important to us, and we certainly had that as well. So that's really one example, I think, and the best one that I can give you, of how that particular type of structure of financing has assisted us in delivering this enormous project, which we hope, all things being equal, which of course they're not, will open in the next couple of months. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Really great to hear, and great to hear as well about how that relationship looked with social and community capital. I can see there's some questions coming in the chat, but what we'll do is we'll come to Paul first of all, and then we'll come back and take all the questions in one go. So again, please do continue popping your questions in the chat, and we will come to those at the end. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Paul, give me 1 second and I will spotlight you. That's you.
Good morning. I hope everyone can hear me first of all, and thank you, Olivia, for introducing me. I'm Paul Thompson. I'm Finance Director at Outer Spaces. Now, what I'm going to do this morning is I'll give you a brief overview of what Outer Spaces is, and then I'll go into the details of the loan and structure and all those type of things. So, Outer Spaces is building a new infrastructure for arts in Scotland. We lease empty properties from commercial landlords on a temporary basis and make the spaces available to visual artists, musicians, performers, arts collectives, and community initiatives free of charge. Since 2021, Outer Spaces has been matching artists with vacant commercial property on a scale that has not existed in Scotland before. In the past 2 years, we have supported more than 600 artists and creative people in more than 60 vacant commercial properties across 13 local authority areas. These properties also provide us with the space to programme curatorial projects, residencies, and commissions, often in collaboration with other arts organisations and partners. Our work is radically inclusive, removing the studio rental costs which prevent many visual and performing artists and musicians from practicing and progressing their careers. Our industry partnerships with colleges and universities are providing arts graduates with spaces to pursue their careers and develop new networks. We are testing new ways of engaging audiences with our partners and collaborators to make a longer lasting impact. Arts collectives and arts-led organisations have vital city centre bases to host their own programmes. Arts workers and freelancers have creative spaces to support their professional lives, and community groups have spaces where members can come together to learn new skills, socialise, and enjoy the proven benefits of participation in the arts. Artists have free studios to use as research base, places where ideas can be tested, collaboration space, storage for artworks, equipment and materials, space for socially engaged practice, or where exhibitions and performances can be developed, rehearsed and presented. Since 2021, we have been operating in Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Greenock, Inverness, Kilmarnock, Kirkcaldy, Motherwell, Newton Mearns, Perth and Port Glasgow. Our team of 7 staff are working towards a regional approach for operational delivery. Outer Spaces has experienced unprecedented growth in a very short period of time and has been operating in 3 key regions: Glasgow and towns west of Scotland, Edinburgh and central, and Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland. In the last year, we've added Inverness and Highlands to our portfolio of spaces. Outer Spaces provides free space for artists across Scotland in disused shops and offices, occupying unused spaces for public good. Our vision is simple: more spaces for artists and more places for free. We aim to address the inequality that exists within access to professional development opportunities in the arts. Our work reflects the diversity of contemporary art practice by being responsive to artists' needs and putting community-centred, collaborative and socially conscious programming at the heart of the project. The majority of our work focuses on space in communities where there is a lack of arts infrastructure, supporting artists to access spaces close to their homes in Scotland's towns and cities, and placing an emphasis on underrepresented voices and those that face barriers in access to the art world because of race, disability, age, gender identity, sexuality, or class, or other socio-economic or geographic barriers. 70% of our current studio holders have never had a studio space, and 100% of them cited the reason as being because it is unaffordable. We are not in competition with established studio providers. We offer a service to those who would not otherwise have studio space to work in. Outer Spaces was born out of the pandemic. Our model is based on unprecedented need for spaces for artists to make work and the unprecedented availability of formerly commercial buildings due to the impact of both the pandemic and the cost of living crisis on Scotland's economy. The reuse and repurposing of existing buildings is the ultimate recycling, by its very nature promoting sustainability. Now, we started in 2021, and it was just with our current CEO. And what we did was we made sure that the business model was sustainable. So for that first year, the CEO did not take a salary. The largest part of our costs are people costs, and that is a substantial overhead. What we needed to do was to get growth in order to achieve a balance of income coming in. Our income is from donations, and those donations are achieved by landlords and by the artists themselves. The whole model is for free, but anyone who can afford can give us a donation. So what we needed was through Social Investment Scotland is that we needed working capital in order to achieve the growth which we were looking at and engaging with landlords. The lead-in time from a landlord being interested in their empty property being used by artists to when we sign the lease and get artists in can be about 3 or 4 months. And so to generate the donations and income, we need this lead-in time. And through Social Investment Scotland, they provided us with a £50,000 loan over 6 years. First year capital free, interest rate 9%. It's not fantastic in terms of what you hear about in terms of commercial loans, but what you have to realise is that commercial banks, or what we realised is commercial banks don't understand the third sector that well and are less inclined to look at your business model. You don't generate profits, you maybe generate surpluses. And going to a social investor who looks at the impact that you're having on communities is so much more important and so important to work with in order to achieve our aims. Our first year, we turned over 65,000. second year 300,000, and we're into our third year and we're probably upwards of 500,000 now and continuing to grow. I mean, we currently have a waiting list of more than 1,500 artists, and we're looking to expand in areas which we previously haven't been represented, namely in Dundee, but in a few other areas as well. Our structure is that we have a board of 3. The board consists of someone who is a CEO for an arts and cultural building in Perthshire. We have a fashion entrepreneur, and we have a CA who is involved in a number of charities. When we built this board, it was through personal contacts, and we are structured as an SCIO, and so it's working together with our board and with our senior leadership team of 4 people. And we're looking to continue to grow. We're in negotiation with Social Investment Scotland. We are looking to potentially buy a building, and we're discussing with them as to how we might go about doing that, and to borrow and have a mortgage. We're also, we have funding from Creative Scotland, Aberdeenshire Council and Glasgow Council also fund us. I think that's me with my spiel. Thank you, Olivia.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Paul, and thank you very much to all our speakers today. There's been questions coming in the chat. There's been questions people have submitted beforehand. So I guess this is kind of the opportunity for us to pick the speakers' brains a little bit more and find out a bit more about their experiences of social investment. So please do continue to pop your questions and stuff in the chat. I'm just going to spotlight Ashita and our speakers just to kind of kick off the Q&A. But please do, as I say, keep your questions coming in the chat, raise your virtual hand. We've also got lots of speakers, lots of investors rather, in the audience, who I'm sure will be happy to jump in with any kind of their expert advice. So let me just spotlight everyone and I'll go on.
Amazing. Thanks, Olivia. You happy for us to get going? I've lost you on my screen.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Olivia. And thank you so much to all of you. That was super interesting. And we can see from the comments in the chat, so we've had a couple of questions and things come through. Olivia also sort of reached out to attendees prior to today's event to ask for questions. So we'll start with some of the questions that we had submitted before kind of in the pre-event run up. And this is a really great question to start with, and I think probably applicable for all of you. But it's one on building relationships. And the question is, what works well when building relationships between investees and investors?
I would say trust, or establishing trust early on, and get them to buy into your project as well. It's trying to get somebody to believe in it almost as much as you do. That was a crucial thing for us at the start, was getting engagement, getting interest from the likes of First Port, getting them excited about what we're trying to do. Yeah,
and I'm really curious, Andrew, like, how did you go about doing that? Like, how did you build that trust, and how did you get that like interest and engagement with the work that you were doing?
I think it was, for us, it was just being passionate about what we're doing and genuinely believing that it's going to work, and trying to, you know, get First Port to buy into that as well, and share that passion with you and understand why it's something that's needed. And then I think you need to know, again, there's a lot of questions, as you'd imagine. I think you need to know the answers, right? And if you've got the answers, they know that you're serious about it. You've done the research, you've done your work. and that was for us at the start anyway. We were able to demonstrate that passion, and we kind of knew what we were doing was going to be right eventually.
Yeah, because I found it really interesting when you were saying at first you applied to a different fund and then you got like redirected, and
Yeah.
that shows that there was like a really like interest in what you were doing to be able to say, actually, this isn't enough to support your ambitions, and you need to think about this instead.
Yeah, I think it was an understanding as well of what we were trying to do, because like I said, we went for that, and they said, well, it sounds like what you're doing is very ambitious, and that amount of money is not going to make any difference. So let's discuss bigger pots of funding, and that was kind of, I think, the start of something.
Yeah, so like building trust and engagement in
Yeah.
what you're doing. And Paul, Karen, anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think from our perspective, one of the key things was that we had experience of Social Investment Scotland in a previous charity we'd worked with, and so it's the building up of contacts in which you can then utilise moving forward was helpful as well, because they understand what you're able to do in a previous relationship, and then move that forward to your existing thing. So it's understanding the people as well as understanding the project.
Yeah, and that's such a great point, isn't it? Because you do carry those relationships with you over a period of years and years. That's a really interesting point. And last but not least, Caroline, anything that you wanted to add onto that?
Well, I think Andrew and Paul have said the two main things. I mean, trust and understanding. So understanding the organisation, the particular organisation, and how it works, how it operates, because there's such a variety in our field of ways of operating. And if they don't understand, they're not really going to grasp how they're going to address the need of the organisation. But I think what Paul's touched on there is really important, and it's about building up the track record. We did that, and we did that effectively, and that's how we did it. Now we're building, and certainly for us, that's starting with sort of smaller things, path networks, and so forth, and then gradually building to where we are now. So they need to take the time really to talk to us, to really get beneath the surface of the organisation, understand how we're structured, how we work, what our aims are, and how we're going to address those barriers, but help us to do it. They can give us advice which can help us to deal with those things.
Yeah, that's such a great point, is actually taking the time to build that understanding. And Chris, I can see you've got your hand up as well. It'd be really interesting to hear from you on this.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a question. I'm also very willing to take questions. So I'm Chris, I'm head of investments at Social Investment Scotland, and I love all three of the speakers and know the stories really well. Just great to hear sort of the successful impact that you're all making. I suppose what I'd be really keen to hear, and hope I'm not going to put my head on the chopping block here, but your experience in engaging with a social lender rather than a grant funder. So how was that for you? And then in particular, the information that was requested from you to allow the social lender, social investor to do their work, and was that appropriate? Do you think it was too much? Was it explained why that was important? And I'm not just talking about financial information, I'm also thinking about social impact.
Really, really great question. Actually, ones that we get from users all the time as well. So yeah, if whoever wants to take that one, please do jump in.
If you don't mind, I can probably pitch in here. Hello, Chris. And yeah, I mean, it's the same information, but it's just different. It's packaged in a different way. So where for a grant funder, that's more focused on delivery of the outcomes and the outputs of the project, and what areas of whatever it is are we addressing through that particular thing. Whereas when it comes to the finances and investment generally, we're looking at providing information and the figures, but in a different, focused in a different way. So it might be more towards how that income generation is going to impact over a period of time, where for grant funding, it has only a short window. So that short window of information is covering the grant period. And very few say, well, what's going to happen after that? Whereas obviously for, in any kind of financial investment, there has to be, the future and where's it going and what are you going to do to deliver that? So just from my own experience of grant funding, and certainly, the investment side has been the same information, but in a different way and with a different focus and for a longer period, or a different time frame, I suppose.
I think one of the key differences between grant and the social investment that we have is that you have to prove that it's affordable, because you have to repay it, and so that it goes, so it becomes a more a financial instrument. But unlike a bank who you might go to try and achieve that lending, the social investor is looking at outcomes which a grant funder would look for, but over a much longer period of time, as Carolyn suggested. But one of the key things for us is the affordability, because if you can't afford to borrow the money, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a really crucial point, and actually something that most social investors will work really diligently through the process on, because it's in nobody's best interest that you borrow money that isn't affordable to you. And I think actually across the board, most social investors are really conscious of that. Is that fair to say, Chris?
I certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just having a sort of the focus on the time scales. So I completely understand why a grant funder will be really interested in the immediate future, potentially just of the project. But when you get into lending over a slightly longer period of time, it's really important that the organization is sustainable for a long time. And it's not just to repay any lending that's been taken out. Obviously, that's very important, but it's to support the longevity of the impact. So it's often more negatively impactful for something to happen for a short period and then disappear, than for it to continue for a longer period. So that's really interesting. I appreciate that. Sorry for, and you could have thrown me under the bus there. Everybody could have thrown us under the bus there. So it sounds like it's been a reasonable experience for everybody as well.
Yeah, it does sound like that actually. And there's, whilst we're on the topic of affordability, there's a question in the chat on curious about the security required by social investors and what the interest rates are generally like. And my understanding is that interest rates can vary across the board because there's so many different factors that go into it, depend on things like the appetite of the investor, the risk, like the various other internal factors they have. Is that kind of, yeah, is that reflective of what it's like when considering interest rates?
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we have to do is understand what funding we have at that time of application. So sometimes there will be slightly better interest rates, and we look at a number of different things. We always, SIS, Social Investment Scotland, and it'll be similar with the other social lenders, will always look at the impact that the organisation is currently making and what the plans will allow to support. There will then be a risk analysis of that. There's then the part about security. I think somebody had mentioned about security. So certain lenders will only lend if there's security there. SIS isn't one of those. We're fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of unsecured lending, but obviously with a higher risk, that sometimes has an impact on the interest rate that's charged. But where there is security, and your SIS does both, we are able to sort of price a bit keener. And I think it's very much in our interest, and it's part of our social mission to make sure that we're providing funding at the cheapest possible interest rate to the organisations. It's absolutely not lost on us. But everybody will have a slightly different way of coming to their interest rate. But our interest rates range from about 7% up to 12% at the moment.
Thanks, Chris. And I'll ask this question. It's one of the ones submitted before. I think it's such a great question. For our peers today, say, if you could go on the journey again, what would you not do?
Yeah. For me, it would be not apply for the wrong fund. But no, I think any mistake you make is a learning experience, and if you make mistakes, you're just gaining experience, and hopefully the next time it comes around, I'll get it right.
That's true, because even in applying for the wrong thing, you still ended up in the right place eventually.
Yeah, I've still got there in the end. I'd say more for the grant side of funding, I'm learning a lot, because it's almost like a different language going for grant applications. So yeah, we're getting knocked back a few times, and we're getting there. We actually, last year we got awarded one, and but because our course was 6 months long, and we only had until March to use it up. Although they awarded it, they said, well, we can't give it to you because the course will go on until July. So just learning wee things like that. So if to go back and do things again, timings would probably be a thing I'd learn.
Yeah, you're right. It is almost like a completely different world with a different set of language and things to consider. Paul, Carolyn, how about you both? If there's anything that you would not, is there anything that you would not do?
I'm struggling with this one, actually. I think because we had so many curveballs thrown at us, because we had COVID during the design team process. And so there were quite a few things that were so out with anybody's control. That manageability was just an everyday process. It was changing. I think we probably would have perhaps got maybe looking at the future earlier. So whilst we have a very good and economically sound business plan, I think factoring in an even longer term look at the finances at a much earlier stage, I think that would have been something we could have done. It hasn't severely impacted anything, but I think now because I like planning, so I think I just would have started that earlier, really, in terms of the longer term. But yeah, I think that's it, really.
Thanks, that's really interesting. Yeah, Paul, how about you?
I think with outer spaces, because we, in a previous organisation, built up the experience, we knew what to do. But if I went back to that previous organisation, the thing which I would have changed was we had a commercial bank who said that they would lend us money, and they took us on a merry dance for 2 years before saying no. And I think the thing that I would have learned from that is just to cut out that whole process by going through such a long period with a commercial bank, and just go to the social investor right away. And we would have saved those 2 years of a lot of wasted time.
That sounds incredibly frustrating, and I'm sorry you went on that experience. We've got a hand up from Fiona and a few more questions in the chat as well, so I'll come to those in a second. But Fiona, did you have a question?
Hi everybody, it's been a really interesting session so far, thank you. My name is Fiona Jones and I work for FedCap. We support people to improve their economic well-being. I was really interested in what Andrew just said there around the trials and tribulations of applying for grants and getting knocked back, and some of the reasons why, and that's certainly an experience we've been through, and those kind of conversations that can be so frustrating. But I was interested in where the line between kind of the purely commercial relationship around the debt or equity relationship with the funder versus whether there's any form of kind of coaching, mentoring, support that comes along with that to help with some of that kind of negotiating the rest of the system while you've got that commercial relationship around those financing structures.
Really great question, Fiona.
I know with us, with First Port, certainly First Port have offered us help at every stage. So once they award funding, that's certainly not the end of the relationship. It's almost like the beginning of something. As it progresses, they really support us all the way through. Events like this, First Port are always quite quick to invite us along to support and get involved and attend, meet new people. So it isn't just go through an application stage, award some funding, and then start repayments. It's much more than that. It's almost like an ongoing partnership almost, where they support us. And if I'm sure if I had any questions or any issues, if I contacted First Port, I'm sure they would help us out.
Okay.
We had an experience with a funder. We through this big project, we had to take out almost £250,000 out of the main contract because of two unforeseen, outrageously large things that happened, and then have to go and fund separately those items to put them back into the project. And one of those two funders really, well, it threw everybody who went into the introduction meeting, because they offered this extraordinary amount of support, which wasn't just, on a one-to-one basis. This was a whole network of people who were experts in their own field that we could approach directly to offer us support. And everybody in the room went, oh my goodness, because this was not just good, this was excellent. And they took an approach to the funding which was quite unique, which was that, well, it's going to take you some time, but you know what? It might take you a little bit longer. And usually it's 31st of March, that's it. And yet we understand that. I mean, that is necessary sometimes. But I think funders themselves are beginning to, I suppose, see that as this, as third sector organisations are delivering more and more that was actually mainstream, that kind of flexibility and approach by a funder towards an organisation needs to be inherent in what they're providing in order for that organisation to be able to deliver it effectively. And the vast majority, and I can't think of any that haven't been really, well, one maybe, really, really excellent. There are a few in this audience here, and they know us well. And I think that personal relationship and understanding, as everybody said, has been absolutely vital.
Yeah, Social Investment Scotland provide expertise on a number of fronts, and one of the ones we'll be taking up soon is through marketing, because we're wanting to rebrand and to improve our brand, get it more noticed, and we don't have that marketing expertise in-house, which they will provide a contact who should be able to help us with that.
Thank you, everybody. Really helpful.
Yeah, and that's actually really good for me to hear as well, because something that we hear a lot from kind of the good finance community of peers that have sort of done this, and we always encourage people to explore all of their options, including kind of high street banks, commercial, various commercial options, because sometimes what you will find is that you may get a cheaper cost of capital elsewhere. Equally, you may also find that people don't understand, other organizations don't understand social enterprise or charity business models to the level of kind of nuance and detail that social investors do. But actually something that we hear more often than not is around that relationship. And what you said, Andrew, about it feels like the beginning of something is what we quite often hear as well. And actually, sometimes with social investment, the repayment periods are over a series of years. So actually, more often than not, it is the beginning of sort of a longer term relationship. But it's really good to hear about like the various forms of support. Chris has just posted in the chat as well to say Social Investment Scotland offer a full programme of investment readiness workshops designed to help leaders. So definitely check that out. And when we follow up, we'll share some of the other sort of investment readiness support that's available out there.
Sorry, just on that. Hi everyone, my name's Lauren. I'm dialing from First Port. Apologies, Andrew, I missed your bit of this presentation because I had problems logging in, but just to kind of echo some of the things that Chris has said, from Social Investment Scotland. So likewise, First Support also offers an investment readiness programme as well called Launch Me, which is, I think there's 2 cohorts every year. I'm relatively new to First Support, so just joined in January, but we do offer investment readiness. So that provides coaching and training on similar topics like marketing, legal structures and so on, and also can provide sort of bespoke coaching and training to organisations or individuals that are considering embarking on social investment. I think one of the questions on the chat is whether we would seek securities. So First Support doesn't seek securities. So I think unlike Social Investment Scotland, I think much like Chris on interest rates, we're looking at the proposition and assessing the appetite and the risk appetite. And I don't think that our interest rates are dissimilar to other social investors like Social Investment Scotland.
Thank you. If you could just pop the link, if there's a link to that support, if you could just pop it in the chat, that would be really helpful for people to navigate whilst they're listening to us talk. I think something else that we always say at Good Finance is that so much of this process is like matchmaking. There's actually a real process of going through, finding the right investor for you, that kind of alignment to mission and values, and matching that across through to actually what is the product, does the repayment look like, what is the interest rates. Part of this is a real sort of matchmaking process. We always kind of encourage everyone to explore all of their various options. So a couple of other kind of questions that we've got through is, and really keen to hear from all of you again on this one, is for organisations that are sort of considering taking it or exploring it for the first time, what do you think are the most common sort of barriers and pitfalls, and what would your advice be to organisations that are exploring this for the first time?
I'll go first. The advice, really, I suppose, is it's all about information. Get as much of it as you possibly can, and understand what you're comparing, because not everything looks, things can look the same, but actually they're different. And very much think about the longer term needs, because what you need today might not be what you need tomorrow. And when you're looking at certainly more in terms of the loan aspect rather than the grant aspect, it's, well, this is where we are now, but how's that going to fit in 5 years and in 10 years? If you've got a longer repayment period, and especially where you're looking at tying up any kind of security. I mean, it's important. There are people around who, they're experts in this stuff, and there are lots of networks where they're willing to share the kind of critical questions that are quite useful to answer when you're looking at investigating what might be the best thing for your organisation. And I would use those, and I do use those all the time, and get people's experiences. How did it work for them? And just like the question that you just asked about, what would you do differently, kind of thing. Find out what they would have done differently, and how they had that experience, and how did it work out for them. Packaging all that together, it takes time. You've got to be prepared for the time and the research, but it will pay off. And I think it's just, be very, very thorough and get as much information as you can. That would be my suggestion.
That's a really great point, is just being thorough and finding out as much as you can, which I guess everyone that's here today is part of that process of finding out as much as they can. Paul and Andrew, anything that you'd want to add to that?
I'd say just keep going, be persistent. We spoke to Social Investment Scotland at the start as well, and they told us that we weren't quite at the point where they could help us because we were too early on in our journey. But I think they did point us towards First Support as well. So if you don't get it right first time, just keep going, and eventually you'll speak to the right person, somebody that understands what you're doing and shares that passion, and you'll get there. Now at the other end, we're actually at a point now where we could probably go back to Social Investment Scotland, because we are looking to that next stage. We do have a physical building now. We're up and running. We've been going for 15 months, so we have a track record of sales and growth. So I mean, the first closed door doesn't mean that's the end. Just keep going. You'll find somebody else that can support you, and then, yeah, like I said, for us, we're going to go back hopefully to Social Investment Scotland and speak to them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's not like a straight or a linear journey, and there'll be some setbacks, but just to keep going. Paul, coming to you. Nothing to add on that one? Great. So Olivia, I wondered if you could just spotlight our social investors for me for a sec, because we've got a couple of questions here that I think would be great if we could get Lauren and Chris to help us answer. Awesome, thank you. So just bringing you back in, both back in, because there's a couple of questions that would be great to get your kind of thoughts and responses on. So one that's come up in the chat is debt the main way of providing social investment?
Bluntly, yes. So I've got a big thing about the two words social investment. It's lending.
Yeah.
We would love to be able to do grants, and we're not here to tell anybody that a loan is better than a grant. We understand a grant is what everybody wants, but there's only so much of that. So when we talk about our funding, it's in plain, clear English, and it is a loan of money. So we provide it, and we would like it to come back, so we can then lend that on to another impactful organisation.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add from First Sport's perspective either. Yeah, the two funds, our two social investment funds are both loan funds. But I suppose you could categorise crowdfunding into social investment or community shares.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not something that First Sport offers. So I think the definition could be expanded beyond what we're talking about today, but not in terms of what First Sport offers.
Yeah. What I will say is that there are sort of there's different variations of it, right? So there will be sometimes where you can have a blended product, which sometimes can be a combination of grant and loan, etc. Sometimes equity is an option, but then genuinely in my more experience, more often than not, it is absolutely loan, and debt is the main channel. So another question for you both is, how do smaller emerging businesses go about qualifying for social investment?
I'll be really clear on that one. If it's a small business and they're looking for social investment or a loan from us, they need to be a social enterprise or a charity. That's the first thing. The second thing is have the appropriate sort of business model that allows their governance to want to take on a loan and be comfortable they repay it. That's where we would start. But from an eligibility standpoint for social investment in Scotland, it's based in Scotland or generating an impact in the community within Scotland, and have an asset lock and pick up the phone and have a call with us.
Thanks, Chris. Anything to add there?
Yeah, no, same for us. So social enterprises that are delivering a benefit in Scotland, they don't necessarily need to be established in Scotland, but certainly delivering a benefit. As I've said, or as I've mentioned earlier on, we do have the investment readiness programme. So if there are individuals out there that are thinking about setting up a social enterprise, then look at those opportunities to formulate your vision and your objectives, and then come and speak to us.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our peer speakers, and an added bonus to have you both here joining us to take some of those questions. I'm conscious of time, so I will move to wrap us up this morning. So I think a couple of things. We've had lots of great resources shared in the chat, so we will pull those together and share them afterwards. So keep an eye out from an email from Olivia. Just collating some of those resources, and I will of course do a plug for Good Finance, so definitely check out the Good Finance website. There's lots of tools on there from could social investment be right for you, lots of different tools on there. And then finally, I will finish with our 7 lessons learned. So we've been very, very lucky at Good Finance over the past 5 years to hear from lots of different people that have taken social investment. And here are kind of the 7 lessons that we've learned over the years. And I think our speakers really echoed some of these today. So firstly, social investment is not benevolent money. You do have to pay it back. It is repayable, it is quite often loan, and you do have to pay it back with interest. So really important to keep in mind that it's not benevolent money, it does need to be paid back. The second one is impact matters, being really clear in what your impact is, but also in the impact that your investor is looking to make and how those things align, is actually a really important part of that matchmaking process. And finding the right investor is making sure that you've both got similar impact goals. It's about so much more than the money, and I think our peer speakers really spoke to that today, is that it is about the relationship, it's about the ongoing support, and it's about that kind of longer term relationship that you build with your social investor. Number 4, honesty is always the best policy. So absolutely, if there's things that you're worried about, if there's things in your numbers or in your operations or in the way that you're operating that you're worried about, definitely better to have those open, upfront and transparent conversations with investors sooner rather than later. The vast majority of investors, A, will want to help you, and B, it's in their best interest to ensure that you get the best outcome as well. So definitely honesty is the best policy. Just because it's social doesn't mean that it's cheaper. So, really do consider and explore all of your options. And, social investors will have various factors into how they set their interest rates. But really the goal of social investment is for it to be a sustainable model and for social investors to be able to kind of reinvest into organizations over long periods. And they do have to factor in various different considerations when they're setting their cost of capital rates. So absolutely sort of explore all of the different options. Due diligence isn't fun, but it does make your business better. So due diligence, that process of kind of getting through the nitty gritty and really working out whether social investment or a particular offer is the right fit for your organization. It is a really robust process. It does involve a lot of information. But do absolutely go through that process if you get there, because it also helps you look at your organization very objectively and can help make your business better. And finally, it always takes longer than you think. So start 6 months before you think you need to start that process of finding the right investor, of doing everything that you need to do. It is a journey. It's not a linear journey. So it does always take longer than you think. So start really as soon as you can. And with that, we have come to time today. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you especially to our peer speakers and our investors for helping us organise today. There's been some great conversations in the chat and resources and platforms shared, so we will round that up. But I will just pass back over to Olivia to do any final wrap-up bits that I might have missed.
Thank you, Ishita. No, I think you've covered everything, and just to echo a huge thank you to our speakers today, Carolyn, Andrew, Paul, and also to the social investors, Chris and John at Social Investment Scotland, Daisy and Lauren at First Support, and also Tracy, who couldn't be here today, from Social and Community Capital, for helping put together today's agenda and supporting us in the session today. We'll be following up with the recording of the session, and also any kind of relevant slides, links, resources in our post-event email, so do keep an eye out for that. Please do get in touch with us and reach out to Good Finance if you do have any questions. If you want to understand a little bit more about some of the tools, resources on the Good Finance website. But just to wrap up and say thank you very much, everyone, for today. It's great to see you all. Thank you very much for your questions. And we hopefully look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.